Welcome to the world of TrendPod AI. Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking into something pretty fascinating, a recent military operation called Operation Midnight Hammer. It's been described as this incredibly precise, super stealthy U.S. strike. Apparently went in, did its job, and got out before anyone really knew what happened.
Yeah.
So our mission today, our deep dive, is to sort of peel back the layers here. We want to unpack the secrecy, the tech involved, and the really meticulous planning and execution that reportedly made this possible. We're pulling from various reports, official statements, trying to give you a clear picture of, what they say happened, how, and what the immediate fallout looked like. Some really eye-opening stuff here.
Okay,
so let's set the scene. This wasn't just out of the blue, right?
No, not at all. This mission falls right in line with the stance from former President Trump's administration, basically, that Iran must not get nuclear weapons. Right. So the specific aim here was pretty direct. Cripple Iran's uranium enrichment program, go after the key facilities.
All right, a high-stakes objective, which leads to the big question. What kind of plane, what kind of tech could even pull off a mission like that? What was the star player in Operation Midnight Hammer?
Well, that would be the B-2 Spirit bomber. And it really is something else. Often called one of the most sophisticated, most secret aircraft ever made. It was designed specifically for these kinds of missions, flying deep into enemy territory, places with really advanced air defenses.
Developed back during the Cold War, wasn't it? By Northrop Grumman.
That's right. And get this, only 21 were ever built. And the cost estimates are around $2.1 billion per plane.
Billion. Wow. That tells you something about its capabilities.
Exactly. It's all about stealth. It has this very distinct shape, like a bat, and uses special materials that absorb radar signals. Makes it incredibly hard to detect. They say its radar signature is like a small bird.
A small bird. Seriously.
Seriously. That's the level of stealth we're talking about. And it can fly a long way, too. Over 6,000 nautical miles. That's 11,000 kilometers without refueling.
So it could launch from the U.S., fly all the way there, and come back.
Pretty much. Long-range missions are its specialty. And it carries its bombs, over 40,000 pounds worth, inside the plane to maintain that stealth profile.
Incredible. And I heard it's just a two-pilot crew, but for these super long flights, like almost 37 hours they mentioned, there are actually some basic comforts.
Yeah, that's true. High automation helps, but they've got things like a small toilet, a fridge, microwave, even space for one pilot to lie down for a bit, necessary for those marathon flights.
Keeps the crew effective, I guess.
Exactly. But here's a really key point for this mission. The B-2 is the only U.S. aircraft set up to carry a specific weapon, the Massive Ordnance Penetrator, or MOP.
The MOP. Okay, hold that thought because that sounds important. Let's talk about the mission plan itself first. You mentioned secrecy. How did they actually manage that on such a scale?
Right. This is where the planning gets, really clever. Reports describe a complex deception strategy. So 7 B-2s took off from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri. They flew east towards Iran. That was a real strike package.
Okay.
But at the same time, another group of bombers was sent west, out over the Pacific, maybe towards Guam, places like that.
Decoys.
Precisely. They were meant to draw attention, make people look the wrong way, and apparently this whole deception, the real target and the decoy move, was known only to a tiny handful of planners and leaders. Super tight-lipped.
So while everyone's potentially looking west, the real mission is unfolding eastwards, under the radar, quite literally.
Exactly. Those eastbound B-2s flew across the Atlantic, the Mediterranean, pretty much in radio silence. They had to refuel multiple times in midair, obviously.
And that whole trip, Missouri to Iran and back, took nearly 37 hours.
Almost 37 hours, yeah. Think about that. The Secretary of Defense at the time, Pete Hegseth, said, our B-2s went in and out and back without the world knowing it all.
Just vanished and reappeared.
Pretty much. General Dan Kane, who was chairman of the Joint Chiefs, also stressed just how extreme the secrecy was. A ghost operation, essentially. Okay, so they get there undetected, thanks to the stealth and the decoys. But hitting the targets, especially the ones buried deep underground, how did that part work? Was it just the B-2s?
It was coordinated. As the B-2s were getting close, maybe around 5 p.m. Eastern time, a U.S. submarine lurking in the Arabian Sea fired off Tomahawk cruise missiles.
Cruise missiles, too.
Yeah, more than 24 of them aimed at the nuclear site near Isfahan. This was about an hour before the B-2s arrived overhead.
So softening things up, or hitting different targets.
Hitting related targets, creating a synchronized attack on multiple sites simultaneously. One expert, Dr. Stacy Pettyjohn, called it a coordinated surprise attack. The idea was to overwhelm any defenses, and apparently it worked. General Kane mentioned that Iranian fighter jets never scrambled, and it seemed their surface-to-air missile systems, their SAMs, just didn't see the B-2s.
They didn't react at all.
It seems that way. Now, another expert, Patriuja Bezilsik, suggested something interesting here. She said, Israeli dominance over Iranian airspace primed the pump for American bombers to operate with impunity.
Primed the pump. What does that imply? Like groundwork had already been laid.
Sort of, yeah. It suggests that maybe previous Israeli operations, intelligence gathering, perhaps electronic warfare, had already weakened or mapped out Iran's air defenses. Maybe their radar was known to have blind spots, or their response protocols were understood. It implies the U.S. wasn't going in completely cold, that the environment was already, let's say, shaped to make it easier for the stealth aircraft to get through.
Okay, that adds another layer. So the B-2s arrive, the Tomahawks have hit Isfahan. Now, about those bunker busters you mentioned earlier, the MOPs?
Yes, the GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator, this was key. It's a 30,000-pound bomb. Huge. The biggest conventional bomb the U.S. has.
30,000 pounds.
Yep, 13,600 kilograms. It's designed specifically to penetrate deeply buried, hardened targets. We're talking through potentially over 200 feet of reinforced concrete.
Wow, and they needed that because
places like the Fordow facility, a primary target, are built deep inside a mountain. Estimates put it maybe 80 to 90 meters down. That's like 260 to 300 feet. You need something special to reach that.
And this was the first time these MOPs were actually used in combat.
Reportedly, yes. First combat use, which is significant in itself. It sends a message that even those super deep bunkers aren't safe anymore.
Okay, so walk us through the actual strike timeline. When did the bombs start falling?
It kicked off around 6:4 p.m. Eastern Time on the Saturday, which would have been very early Sunday morning in Iran, about 2:10 a.m. The lead B-2 dropped the first 2 MOPs on Fordow. Then, over the next 25 minutes or so, the other B-2s released another 14 MOPs on Fordow and also the Natanz facility.
Well, Tomahawks were hitting Isfahan.
Right. A coordinated hit on all 3 major sites involved in Iran's nuclear fuel processing. All told, something like 75 precision weapons were used, and the whole mission involved over 125 aircraft if you count support, refueling, maybe fighters flying cover far away.
That's a massive, complex operation. So the strike happens. What was the immediate aftermath? What did the U.S. claim, and what was the reaction?
Well, the U.S. side declared it a huge success. Secretary Hegseth said it was incredible and overwhelming, claiming, "We devastated the Iranian nuclear program." Pretty strong words.
And President Trump.
He echoed that, said Fordow is now gone, called it a spectacular military success, and even added a warning about hitting other targets if necessary. General Kane also reported initial assessments showed extremely severe damage and destruction at all 3 locations. It was definitely framed as a major blow. And, as noted, the largest B-2 strike ever, longest mission of its type since 2001.
Okay, that's the U.S. assessment. Very confident. But there are always 2 sides, right? What did Iran say, and what did other analysts think?
Absolutely. Iran, predictably, denied the extent of the damage claimed by the U.S. They downplayed the impact and vowed retaliation. That's fairly standard. But analysts like Dr. Pettyjohn, while acknowledging the sophistication, raised a key question. Will this actually permanently set back Iran's nuclear program?
Right. You can bomb buildings, but can you bomb knowledge? Can you bomb intent?
That's the core issue, isn't it? Tactical success, destroying equipment, facilities, that's measurable. But the strategic goal, stopping a country from wanting or being able to pursue nuclear weapons long term, that's much harder. You might cause delays, set them back years, but the expertise often remains. Sometimes attacks like this can even strengthen resolve or lead them to disperse their program more, make it harder to track. So the long-term effectiveness is always debated.
It's definitely a complicated picture. So, recapping quickly. We had the super stealthy B-2 bombers, an elaborate deception plan sending decoys one way while the real strike went another, near radio silence, long-range flight, coordinated Tomahawk missile strikes, and the first ever use of these massive MOP bunker busters against deeply buried targets. Quite the operation.
Absolutely. A real showcase of advanced tech and planning. But it does leave you thinking, doesn't it? If we try and connect this to the bigger picture, okay, you achieve tactical success, targets are hit, but what happens next? What are the ripple effects, maybe the unintended consequences for stability in the region, for diplomacy? When you unleash this kind of power, especially in such a high-profile yet secret way, it certainly raises questions about where things go from here.
A lot to think about indeed. That brings us to the end of this deep dive on Operation Midnight Hammer. We hope this breakdown gave you some insight into this complex event. Thank you.